Stillness is not laziness, it is sacred ground. In a world that moves at breakneck speed, where our value is often measured by our productivity, stillness can feel awkward, even irresponsible. But in the eyes of God, stillness is not wasted time. It is a holy space. It is where the noise of the world fades and the whisper of heaven becomes clear. Stillness is not the absence of movement. It is the presence of meaning. It is where we cease striving, not because we've given up, but because we've come home. Stillness is the place where healing begins. When we stop running long enough to notice our own soul, we begin to hear the aches we've ignored, the longings we've silenced, the weariness we've hidden behind our pace. In the stillness, there is room for God to speak, not through dramatic signs, but through gentle nudges, through the soft echo of truth, whispered in quiet moments. Stillness is not weak. It is brave. It takes courage to resist the pressure, to prove, to perform, to keep going, even when you're falling apart inside. But when we dare to be still, we create space for God to meet us. We step into a kind of rest that isn't about sleep or escape, but about being fully known and fully held. In stillness, we remember we are not our calendars, our outcomes, or our accomplishments. We are children of a God who invites us to be before we do. Stillness reorders what hustle disorients. It aligns our hearts back to the truth. It gives our minds room to breathe. And it gently reminds us that the most powerful moments in life are not always the loudest, they're often the quietest. In that sacred silence, we rediscover the voice of the one who never stopped speaking. We just needed to slow down long enough to hear him. Before the world has a chance to pull at you, before notifications and headlines and expectations start competing for your mind, pause. Breathe. Let that first breath be sacred. Let it belong to God. In that quiet space between sleep and motion, there is a holy invitation, one that's easily missed if we rush toward the noise. The first quiet breath is not just an act of stillness, it is a declaration of priority. It is the soul choosing alignment before activity. Too often we reach for our phones before we reach for peace. We scroll before we surrender. But in doing so, we allow the world to speak before God does. That first moment of the day carries more power than we realize. It's not just about routine. It's about remembering. Remembering who we are. Remembering whose we are. The first quiet breath is an anchor in a culture that demands constant motion. It centers us in truth before the day unfolds its uncertainties. What if that first breath became a conversation with God? Not a long speech, not a pressured prayer, just a simple whisper. Lord, I'm here. That one moment of availability can reframe everything that follows. Because when we begin with presence, we carry presence. When we start with God, we walk differently into the chaos. The to-do list still exists. The responsibilities remain, but our spirit is steadied. We are not reacting to life, we are responding with intention. There is power in the pause. There is peace in the breath, and there is purpose in choosing to begin the day with God. The first breath reminds us that we don't walk into the day alone, that whatever waits for us, conflict, decisions, fatigue, pressure, we have already rooted ourselves in something stronger, deeper, eternal. So tomorrow, before anything else, before the coffee brews or the email pings, stop. Inhale slowly. Let that breath be a surrender, an acknowledgement that you belong not to productivity, not to the opinions of others, not even to your own expectations, but to a faithful God who meets you in the quiet. Your phone can wait, the world can wait, but your soul, it needs that moment, that still holy first breath. Let it be God's. God is not waiting for your perfection. He's not measuring your performance. He's not keeping a checklist of eloquent prayers or flawless behavior. What he wants, what he has always wanted, is you, your honest presence, your real, unfiltered, imperfect heart. Some of us come to God with pressure on our backs and rehearsed words on our lips as if we have to earn His attention. We try to sound strong even when we're breaking. We offer polished prayers when what we really need to do is cry. But God is not moved by performance. He's moved by presence. He doesn't need us to impress Him. He wants us to invite Him. And there's a vast difference between the two. When you show up with your fear, your doubt, your fatigue, God meets you there. When you have no words, but still show up, He hears the unspoken ache beneath your silence. When you're overwhelmed and can only say, "Lord, help," He receives that as worship. Because true communion is not about eloquence, it's about honesty. And the moment you stop pretending is the moment you start connecting. You don't need a spiritual resume to come to God. You need to surrender. You don't need a solution. You need stillness. You don't need to be whole. You just need to be here. Presence is more powerful than perfection. God doesn't need you to bring answers. He is the answer. And sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is sit in His presence and say nothing. Just be. Just breathe. Just let yourself be seen. There's freedom in this, a quiet kind of freedom that lifts the pressure and replaces it with peace. When you stop performing, you start receiving. You begin to understand that being loved by God has never depended on how well you behave, but on how willing you are to come. He wants to meet you in the raw places, not just the refined ones. So if all you can bring today is a tired heart, bring it. If your prayer is messy and your mind distracted, bring that too. If your faith feels small, it's still enough. Because God is not asking for your perfection. He's asking for your presence. And right now, that is more than enough. Surrender is not giving up. It's not quitting or walking away or losing. It's letting go of what was never meant to be carried alone. It's the moment when our clenched fists finally open, not in defeat, but in trust. Because there comes a time when holding on becomes heavier than laying it down, when control becomes a cage and surrender becomes the doorway to peace. We often confuse surrender with weakness, but in the kingdom of God, surrender is strength. It's not passive. It's not a retreat. It's the bold decision to stop striving in your own power and start trusting in His. It's brave to say, "God, I can't carry this anymore." It's sacred to say, "I don't know the outcome, but I know you." Letting go is not giving up. It's handing over. It's shifting the weight from your shoulders to His hands. There are burdens you were never designed to bear, the pressure to fix everyone, the fear of the future, the shame of your past, the weight of expectations you were never meant to meet. We drag these things behind us like invisible anchors, convinced we have to keep going. But God is not asking you to drag anything. He's asking you to release it, not because He needs help, but because He knows you do. When we surrender, we don't lose control. We return it to the one who never lost it. We don't lose ourselves. We find our truest identity as sons and daughters who are safe, seen, and secure. We don't fall apart. We fall into grace. Surrender allows God to do what only He can: redeem, restore, and realign. It creates space for Him to move where our efforts have reached their end. So what are you still carrying? Is it a relationship, a regret, a responsibility that's become too much? What if today, instead of gripping it tighter, you released it? What if the breakthrough doesn't come through effort, but through trust? What if the strength you're looking for is waiting on the other side of letting go? God is not disappointed in your limits. He's not surprised by your weariness. He's not asking you to be stronger. He's asking you to surrender. Because surrender is not the end of the fight. It's the beginning of freedom. God rarely shouts. He doesn't compete with the noise. He doesn't push His way into our crowded thoughts or force His voice over the chaos. Instead, He waits. He whispers. And those whispers, though quiet, carry the weight of eternity, if only we're still enough to hear them. In the world we live in, silence is a rarity. We wake up to noise. We fall asleep to distraction. Our minds scroll, constantly flickering from one thought to the next, conditioned to fill every space with stimulation. But in all that movement, something sacred gets lost. The whispers of God get drowned out by the volume of everything else. God doesn't speak to impress, He speaks to connect. His voice is not for performance, but for presence. And He often speaks most clearly in moments of stillness when the external world has quieted and the internal one finally begins to listen. That's why spiritual stillness is not a luxury, it's a necessity. The world tells us that silence is wasted time, but heaven tells us it's where we meet the voice that changes everything. To hear God's whisper, we must slow down. Not just physically, but mentally and spiritually. We must lay down our distractions. Not forever, just long enough to create a space wide enough for Him to step into. A whisper requires proximity. God doesn't shout from afar, He speaks from near. The closer you lean in, the clearer His voice becomes. And the more you quiet the noise, the more unmistakable His presence becomes. God has not stopped speaking. We've just stopped listening. But the invitation is always there. Come away from the crowd. Shut the door, be still, and know. Maybe you've been begging for direction, for clarity, for comfort, and maybe the answer has already come, not in thunder, but in a whisper that got buried beneath busyness. You don't have to earn His voice, you just have to make space for it. And that space may look like a few minutes of silence before the day begins. It may look like turning off your notifications. It may be found in a quiet walk, in still journaling, in a single deep breath, followed by a whispered prayer. Lord, speak. I'm listening. Don't underestimate the quiet. Don't despise the stillness, because God's most powerful words often come wrapped in gentleness. And if we can learn to value the hush, we may just hear heaven breaking through one whisper at a time. Your worth was never meant to be measured by your output, not by how much you achieve, not by how many people applaud, not by how well you perform. Your value is not found in what you do, it's found in whose you are. We live in a world that ties identity to productivity. From the moment we wake up, we're told to chase, to climb, to become. But in God's kingdom, you don't have to earn belonging. You already belong. You were loved before you accomplished a single thing. You were chosen before you took your first breath. God's affection for you is not based on your perfection, it's anchored in His nature. Love is who He is, and you are who He loves. We forget this so easily. When we fall short, we question our value. When we fail, we wonder if we're still worthy. But grace was never dependent on your performance. It was always about God's promise. He calls you His child, not His employee. He invites you to rest in your identity, not strive to prove it. And that changes everything. Even on your worst day, when everything feels messy and broken, God's love does not waver. You are not your mistakes. You are not your titles. You are not your timeline. You are His. And that truth is the safest place you can live from. Because when your identity is rooted in Christ, you're not shaken by the highs and lows of life, you're anchored in something unmovable. What you do matters, yes. Your calling, your contribution, your dreams, they matter. But they are not the foundation of your worth. They are the fruit of knowing who you belong to. And when you begin from love, not working for it, you live differently, freer, fuller, truer. So today, release the need to prove. Let go of the pressure to be more, do more, fix more. You don't have to strive to be seen. You already are. You don't have to fight to be loved. You already are. You don't have to perform to be accepted. You already are. Let your soul rest in this. Your identity is secure, not because of what you've done, but because of who He is. You are His, and that is enough. Stillness is not weakness. It is a strength clothed in quiet. It is the quiet defiance against a culture obsessed with hustle. It is the sacred pause that says, I know where my help comes from. In a world that equates busyness with importance and motion with meaning, stillness often looks like falling behind. But in God's kingdom, stillness is where power is reborn. It takes strength to stop when everything tells you to keep going. It takes courage to be silent when noise feels productive. Stillness is not about passivity, it's about posture. It is the posture of surrender, the stance of someone who knows that peace is not the absence of problems, but the presence of God. True strength is not proven by how much you can carry, but by knowing when to lay it down. We often assume that to be strong is to never slow down, never stop, never show weakness. But that's not the strength Jesus modeled. He rose early to be alone with the Father. He withdrew from the crowds. He valued solitude not as retreat, but as replenishment. Stillness was part of His rhythm, and it should be ours too. Because we cannot pour from an empty soul. We cannot lead with a fractured heart. We cannot endure with a restless spirit. Stillness restores what striving strips away. It heals what constant motion numbs. It is in the quiet that we remember who we are and who we are not. We are not the source, we are the vessel. We are not God, we are His. And in the hush, in the surrender, in the slowness, God meets us and fills what has been depleted. The bravest thing you can do today might not be to push harder. It might be to pause, to breathe, to create space for the Spirit to do what your effort cannot. Because there are battles won in stillness that cannot be won in striving. There is a kind of strength born only in silence, the kind that can't be shaken when the storms come. Don't confuse quiet with quitting. Don't mistake pause for passivity. Stillness is sacred resistance. It is how we say with our soul, I will not be owned by this place. I belong to a deeper rhythm. And from that rhythm comes power, not the power to dominate, but the power to endure, to love, to stand firm in truth. Let the world run, let the pressure mount, but let your soul be still. Because in that stillness, God is building something stronger in you than the world could ever offer. Stillness with God is not meant to be a rescue station we run to only when we're overwhelmed. It's meant to be a rhythm, a steady, sacred pattern, woven into the fabric of our everyday lives. We were never created to run at full speed until we crash. We were created with limits, with hearts that long for rhythm, for rest, for the grounding presence of God. Stillness is not just a solution for crisis, it's a lifestyle of connection. When stillness becomes a rhythm, it becomes a refuge we return to, not because we're falling apart, but because we know it's where we're held together. It's where clarity is restored, where chaos untangles, where the soul remembers what truly matters. When we treat stillness as a temporary fix, we rob it of its sustaining power. But when we return to it, day after day, moment after moment, it reshapes how we see, how we respond, how we live. God is not a last resort. He is the first breath. The steady presence waiting to meet us in the mundane as much as in the mess. Making stillness a rhythm means we don't just pause when life gets loud, we pause because we've learned to value the quiet. We seek stillness not because we're weak, but because we've tasted the strength that flows from abiding. This rhythm doesn't have to be dramatic. It could be 5 minutes of silence in the car before going to work, a breath prayer while waiting in line, a whispered surrender as your feet hit the floor each morning. It's not about formality, it's about frequency. It's about presence. God honors even the smallest moments we give Him. And the more we return, the more we crave the space He fills. Stillness, as rhythm, transforms us. It becomes the melody beneath the noise, the anchor beneath the storm, the pulse beneath the pressure. It keeps us aligned when everything tries to pull us in 100 directions. It reminds us who we are and whose we are. It makes room for joy to grow deep and peace to linger long. So let stillness be more than a break from the chaos. Let it be your daily breath, your quiet return, your place of sacred rhythm where striving ceases and grace begins again. And every time you come back to it, you'll find the one who never left, just waiting, just whispering, just enough for today. Prayer was never meant to be a performance. It's not a speech to impress God, not a ritual that requires perfect phrasing or poetic words. Prayer is presence. Prayer is permission. Prayer is the soul turning toward God and saying, even in a whisper, I'm here. There's something holy about raw, honest prayer. The kind that doesn't come dressed in confidence, but in vulnerability. The kind that isn't scripted, but spilled sometimes through tears, sometimes in silence, sometimes with trembling hands and a breaking voice. And that kind of prayer moves heaven, not because it's polished, but because it's real. Because God doesn't need eloquence. He longs for honesty. We often hesitate to pray because we feel unqualified. We don't know what to say. We worry we'll say it wrong. But God is not grading your grammar. He's not waiting for the perfect words. He's waiting for your heart. Even if your only prayer today is, God, I'm tired, or I don't know what to do, that's enough. That's surrender. That's sacred. God listens to groans too deep for words. He understands the sighs that language cannot hold. He hears the prayers hidden in journal pages and the ones that never make it past the lump in your throat. You are never too broken, too lost, or too late to pray. And when you don't have words, the Spirit intercedes for you. Prayer doesn't require strength, it invites surrender. Sometimes prayer is loud with passion. Other times, it's quiet with pain. But whether you're declaring promises or whispering through anxiety, you are heard, you are held, you are known. Prayer is not about doing it right. It's about showing up. It's about leaning in. It's about choosing to be with God when you could so easily keep running. So release the pressure to perform. Let go of the idea that your prayers need to sound like someone else's. Just come as you are. Come messily. Come afraid. Come tired. Come rejoicing. Come with questions. Come with hope. But above all, just come. Because in that sacred space where words fail and hearts speak, God meets you not with judgment, but with grace. Not with demands, but with delight. He's not looking for perfection. He's looking for presence. And if all you can say today is, God, I'm here, then that's more than enough. Peace doesn't always arrive like a roaring wind. It doesn't always crash in with clarity or rush in with revelation. Sometimes peace comes gently, quietly, almost unnoticed. It slips in like morning light through the cracks of drawn curtains, like a whisper in the stillness that says, you don't have to move, just stay. I'm here. We often look for peace in grand solutions, in immediate answers, in visible breakthroughs. We expect it to be loud enough to drown out the noise of our fears or strong enough to silence our questions. But true peace doesn't need volume to be powerful. It doesn't always come with certainty or a full map of what's ahead. Sometimes it comes with presence. And presence changes everything. There are moments when your heart is racing, when your thoughts are circling, when everything inside you wants to run or fix or escape. And it's in that swirl that God's peace often arrives, not as a resolution, but as an invitation. A quiet, steady voice that says, "Be still. You don't have to understand. Just trust that I am with you." Peace isn't the absence of trouble. It's the assurance that you are not alone in it. It's not always a change in your situation, it's a shift in your soul. A grounding, a remembering that even when life is uncertain, God is not. That even when the path ahead is unclear, His presence is unwavering. Sometimes we miss peace because we're waiting for a feeling, and what God gives us is a whisper. A moment, a breath, a pause. Sometimes it's not even a word, it's just a knowing. A sacred stillness that holds you when nothing else can. That says, you're safe here. You don't have to strive. You don't have to figure it out. Just stay. And staying takes trust. It takes courage to remain when the world tells you to hurry. It takes faith to rest when fear demands motion. But peace will never be found in panic. It is found in presence, in sitting with God long enough to let the stillness sink in, long enough to let His love settle the restlessness in your bones. So if you're waiting for a sign, maybe this is it. Maybe the peace you've been chasing has already come, not in the form of certainty, but in the invitation to breathe, to slow down, to stay with Him even when you don't know what's next. Let that be enough for today. Let peace be the quiet voice that reminds you that you are held, you are known, and you are not alone. Stay. He is here.